I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. I'm here today, of course, with Teresa Kenny, my co-host, and Jillian Bosak. I know Jillian because she was a student in a cohort to become a hormone coach through the Fiat Institute. So that's exactly why we brought her in today, because I know that she has an awesome niche with her hormone coaching. What really captured me about you, Jillian, is just how passionate you are about women's athletics, the cycle, but how these two can be melded together successfully, especially for very serious athletes. And what I also really love about you, Jillian, and I hope we talk about during this interview, is how you're passionate about providing information and content to those who coach women, right? Especially we think about, one of my favorite coaches was a man. You know, he in track, he was my favorite coach. He was male. And it's important for these really wonderful, awesome men and women to understand how to coach their very serious female athletes. You yourself are a coach. Jillian, you're a basketball coach, a high school basketball coach, you're a hormone coach, you're a personal trainer. You live in Lincoln, Nebraska, or near there. And again, we're so excited to have you on the show because even myself as an athlete, I would love to learn even more from you than I've already learned, Jillian, just because of this niche is so specific, but very important. So thank you for being on our show today, Jillian.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I feel like I'm sitting amongst superstars here. Like, you guys are doing amazing work, and I'm so excited to be here and talk about this.
Well, we're so glad to have you on. And, you know, it's due time because I've been having this thought in my mind about having you on. And again, I'm excited to have you here. So let's just start off, Jillian. For the athletes who are thinking to themselves, okay, I love the idea of cycle syncing. I know I have 4 phases of my fertility cycle. I know there's times in my cycle where my estrogen is higher, therefore my testosterone is higher, therefore I can build more muscle and I'm more energetic. But what about the times of my cycle where I am more tired? Or maybe I'm more vulnerable to injury? How do you help the coaches and how do you help the women understand how to still train in those areas of our cycle, the times of our cycle where we're more vulnerable to fatigue, to injury, and so on?
Right. Great question. So if you're speaking directly into the injury aspect of it, right, that is where the importance of our training comes into play. So yes, being female in general, not even with our cycle, we are a little more prone to injury. We have wider hips, so therefore our knees cave in easier, right? We have a little weaker muscles. So right, just being female kind of just sets us up for a little more prone to injury. Then you put the cycle on top of that, and then that's where, you know, we kind of pile on the variables, right? So it's not just because we're in our follicular phase or in our luteal phase. That's not just because of that we are more prone to injury, right? That's what we have to think of. It's not that mental state of, oh my gosh, I'm on my period, or oh my gosh, I'm, you know, in my luteal phase, I'm leading up to it. Now I better not do anything because I don't want to risk injury. It is not just because you're in that time of your phase that you're going to be injured, you're going to be higher prone to injury. It is just another variable, right? We just kind of stack those variables. So if you're also imbalanced muscularly, that's a variable, right? So being, you know, how we're structured, that's a variable. If we're tired, that's a variable. If we're sick, that's a variable, right? So it's all those things that just kind of stack against you if we're speaking just injury when it comes to the female athlete, right? So we just have to think of all those different variables that come along with not only just our cycle.
That totally makes sense. In terms of, yeah, I mean, I could see how, you could just think, oh, it's just about the cycle. And like, I am not going to get injured because I'm in my estrogen phase, but you didn't sleep last night because you had a study, and you have a cold. And so that totally makes sense. It's like the
Yes.
body can be compromised by multiple things. And when we think of any performance, that could be athletics, it could be giving a talk, it could be performing in a corporate business. We do have variables that stack upon us. And as women,
Yes.
because we're so multitasking, you would think that we would have more variables maybe than the average guy would out there.
Right,
So
right.
that completely makes sense to me. But Jillian, like if someone's listening, they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about in terms of like the phases of the cycle and how would it impact athletics or how it would impact performance. Give us a 101 on just the cycle and the hormones and how each, I don't know, you can divide it into how many phases you want, but like how it would impact performance.
For sure. So I'm sure you've been over the cycle 100 million times on this podcast, right? So I will just kind of give a very brief of the cycle in general. So we have the follicular phase, the luteal phase, period, and ovulation, right? So there's those four phases. The I would say when it comes to an athlete or performance, the luteal phase is the phase that kind of needs the most attention, if you will. Um, Estrogen alone is more of an anabolic hormone, right? It is better at rebuilding itself, where and estrogen is more dominant in our follicular phase. And then when we get to our luteal phase, progesterone is more dominant. And that hormone in and of itself is more catabolic. So the body experiences more breakdown just because that is the dominant hormone at that point. So if we're thinking in phases and in performance, when we're in that luteal phase, when progesterone is more dominant, we really need to be conscious of our recovery, a recovery that now becomes even more important because progesterone is helping us to break down. So if we just got after it in a workout, in a training session, in our luteal phase, we need to recover even more because of progesterone being dominant. In our estrogen dominant phase, our follicular phase, that is where maybe we can get after it a little bit more, right? We can put in a few extra sessions. We can make our workout a little bit longer. So those are just kind of some things within our cycle that we need to pay more attention to, if you will, during each of those phases. And like I said, the main ones are going to be like when you're estrogen dominant or when you're progesterone dominant.
So it's interesting because, I think as our listeners go back into our vault of our episodes previous, and I invite you guys to do Ovulation, the Main Event, Season 1, Overview of the Fertility Cycle, Season 1. But it is very interesting how just every day we're hormonally just a little bit different. And Teresa, what you said I thought was very interesting too. Like as multitasking women, it's interesting that we're just so variable often. We can shift and move. And as a matter of fact, it's how we're built. Like every day we're just a little bit different. But thinking too, Jillian, about how you're saying it's about preparing other things that go along with wellness and not just always focusing on the cycle itself. It's about structuring our workout so that we are properly balanced in terms of muscle strength. I think about when I was in track, I had a knee injury. It's kind of embarrassing actually. We were getting pictures for whatever, our track team, and the Unidome. So I'm from Cedar Falls, Iowa. The Unidome is this huge dome, indoor track, indoor football, everything. And I'm walking down the bleacher stairs. My whole team's waiting, and I fall. I tumble. And I tumble, tumble, tumble. I mean, I'm like big and I'm just tumbling down these bleachers. And I really bang at my knee. I remember going to the athletic trainer a week later after I had fallen and banged at my knee and it was still really sore. And I thought it's a bruise. Like, it's not like I dislocated my knee. I didn't tear something. I just bruised my knee. And the athletic trainer said, well, because you're a woman and because the way your knee is structured, kind of like what you were saying, Jillian, you don't have the strong quadriceps. You know, your quads aren't as big and strong as a man. It doesn't stabilize the knee like it would for a man. So it is going to take longer for you to recover from that bruised knee even than it would a man simply by the design of your quads. So what's the ticket? Build up your quads, right? Build up your quads. So that story came to mind, Jillian, when you were talking about what are some ways we can support the athlete even beyond the cycle. And so let's talk about some of those hacks. You know, what are some tried and true tips in the follicular phase and the luteal phase? Because again, just as a reminder, we first have our period and then we move into the follicular phase. We ovulate. After ovulation is the luteal phase. So what are some tried and true exercises that are fine no matter what phase of the cycle you're in? And what would you recommend during the estrogen dominant phase, meaning, or the estrogen genius phase leading up to ovulation, and then the progesterone genius phase after ovulation?
Right. So first, back to your story.
Yeah.
You're talking about the quads. And actually, we don't want quad domination.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, we get it.
Yeah. That's so funny that you bring that up. The very important for us as females is glutes, is our core. Okay. Because we don't want, like, if our quads or our hamstrings in either way are dominant, that is another variable. We're going to be stacking on top of ourselves as far as injury. So the muscle balances are very important. So focusing on our core, especially our glutes, is going to be very important. But more important is our form. Our form is huge when it comes to this. And I think we as women, if it's not in small groups, we get lost in the weight room. And we don't want to look in the mirror. We don't want to look at ourselves. But it is so important because that form can make or break your workout, your muscular balances, all of that is just so important. And then it's also important then for the trainers to know that as well. So if we're going to be in our progesterone dominant phase, or the luteal phase, right? We need to just slow down a little bit and be more cognizant of our form. Okay. In, estrogen dominant, the follicular phase, we still need to be cognizant of our form, but it's just not going to be as difficult, if that makes sense, right? But at all times, our form as females is crucial. It really is crucial. And for coaches to know that is just as crucial, and things to look out for when it comes to form. Things like if you're jumping off a box or landing off of a box, we don't want our knees to cave in, right? We want those to be level and in alignment with our ankles. So things like that is probably the number one thing that we really need to be looking out for when it comes to form. Okay, because as an athlete, most of our sports, except for the track, is very explosive, right? We're landing, we're jumping, we're changing directions. So that's why it is so important to have those muscle balances properly, as well as our form within the training. Okay, because if we do it in training, then we're going to naturally do it in our competition. So did that answer your question? I think I went off on a tangent a little bit, but
no, that was good. That was good because the question I had was, what is something that's important no matter what phase of the cycle you're in? But even as we apply form to our follicular phase versus our luteal phase, well, because we know we're more vulnerable to injury during our luteal phase, we know that if we're practicing proper form and getting into that habit throughout the whole cycle for every single day, right? Less
Exactly.
likely will be
Mhm.
injured. And again, it's important for coaches to be very proactive, right? With that
Yes.
form. And Jillian and Teresa, tell me if this is you too. I used to think as an athlete in the weight room, I used to think that my form was right. And in some ways, by the naked eye, even if I'm looking at myself in the mirror to make sure my form is good, it looks right. But I was not engaging my core, my deep core, and my glutes were not firing. I was not activating my glutes. I remember I was able to bench press more than I could squat. And I'd constantly get back injuries, bulging discs, hip issues. And I thought, I feel like I'm doing everything right. And I was not engaging my deep core. I wasn't like tucking my hips in as I'd come up from a squat or whatever, you
Mhm.
know? And
Mhm.
so basically, even if this whole episode was on form alone, I think
Right.
I think that's just so important, Jillian.
We could. We really could do a whole episode. And it's like, and if when you get into the weight room, I will just say, if you are, I think it's so helpful to have, you know, those posters that show the human body in all of its muscular form,
Mhm.
to look at that. And then when you're doing a certain exercise, think of the dominant muscle that you're using at that time and engage it.
Mhm.
That muscle needs to be engaged, right? Like if you're squatting, when you're at the bottom and you're going to go to lift up, think of your butt, right? Like like that is what needs to be firing, and even going up and down stairs, like just being aware of the muscle that should be firing is a game changer almost when it comes to form.
100% Jillian,
Yeah.
because like even if someone were to say to me as a young athlete, your glutes need to fire, I'd be like, I don't know what you mean. I would be like, I don't know what you mean. But now for me, and Jillian, correct me if I'm wrong, what I think of when I think of firing a muscle is that you're engaging it, like you're feeling it,
Yeah.
you're maybe even flexing it in a sense,
Yep.
or right? Is that what you would say, Jillian, when you say
Yes.
fire a
Yes.
muscle?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. When you fire something, it's working.
It's
It's doing
working.
its
You
job.
feel it.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, I'm going to interrupt here and then I'm going to let Teresa ask another question. But before we do that, I'm going to interrupt our show today to thank We Heart Nutrition for sponsoring our episode and our podcast, actually. And we are so thankful. So, for those of you who are looking for strong supplements that are bioavailable, that also go to a worthy cause, We Heart Nutrition's mission and cause is so strong. Check them out, weheartnutrition.com. If you buy any supplements, you get 20% off of any supplement you buy your first order with the code GENIUS. I love the magnesium glycinate. I love the hormone balance, or what's it called? Wholesome balance. It's a hormone support supplement. Really good. Also, I do the supplement for women 40 and above, which is also very strong. So, again, if you're looking for a strong supplement for a worthy cause, weheartnutrition.com at checkout Genius, GENIUS, for 20% off.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to ask Jillian, you had mentioned in some of the kind of stuff that you wanted to talk about today that only 6% of sports science research has been done exclusively on women, which this is not shocking because in medicine in general, research has been very slow to come using our female bodies. And so in that, what are, I guess, like the most common mistakes, I guess, that are made with coaches and trainers in athletic performance because we're just assuming all research applies to, again, men because that's where the research has been done. And how can we change and kind of see that women are not just small men? What are the things that we need to think about there?
Yeah, so I think like we were talking before, form is a really big thing. Like we need to be very mindful of our form in the gym. I think just being aware of the differences alone, male versus female. Okay, so things like nutrition. if we talk about nutrition, we look as females, we look at nutrition very differently, just even in a societal way, right? We tend to look at nutrition that it is going to help with how we look more than our performance, right? So we even look at nutrition differently. We think of things like we as women don't even want to talk about our cycle holding us back because we will be looked at, and especially no offense to male coaches, but like, especially if we have a male coach, if we bring that up, we may feel or seem like we're weak and fragile and we can't perform at our best if we say anything, right? Oh, maybe he'll bench me if I say something like that, or maybe I won't start, right? So just as coaches, just being aware that being somebody that they can talk to, right? They can bring it up and you won't make them feel like they are fragile or they're weak or like, oh, great, she's having her period, so we probably better just sit her, right? So just that awareness, I feel like is huge because we are starting to, as far as more studies are coming out strictly on females, that is happening, and I'm so grateful for that. But it takes a long time for that to be applied, if you will. So just that awareness of our differences, I think, is key for not only us as a athlete, but as those that are taking care of the athletes, the personal trainers, the coaches, the nutritionists, right? Just being aware of those differences, I think is going to be is very helpful. It's very helpful. So nutrition. I think what's crazy about that study, the 6% of studies is done exclusively on females, is to think that all the training that we have received as coaches, as personal trainers, as anything that is involved with that, all those certifications that we have gotten is based on that information, is based on males, right? So how wrong we may have it is insane to me.
Whoa.
And just knowing that fact alone, even if we don't have all the answers, just knowing that fact alone is huge.
Whoa. Such a good point because you're a personal trainer. So that's
Yeah.
great. I mean,
Right.
women who want to be personal trainers and want to work with women to be thinking of that in your mind that while how I'm being trained is great, it's going to likely be in mind for the male athlete.
Mhm.
And to think
Mhm.
about how women are not many men, we're women.
Right.
Something that I know is an issue with female athletes is amenorrhea. They lose
Yep.
their period.
Yep.
They work so hard. They don't eat enough food, protein, fats, whatever,
Mhm.
and they're not getting their period. And almost, I've mentioned this before in our previous podcasts, but it was almost like a badge of honor in a weird way. When I was an athlete, it was a badge of honor, and I felt shame for still getting my period. Again, having no idea the benefit of these female hormones circulating through my blood, and I had no idea that how important it is and how well off I was in the long run for having my period throughout those years. But
Yes.
how does that experience for women and as a team, even being this badge of honor in a weird way, how do you work with this frame of mind? And how do you empower the female athletes that know your period actually is working for you? Your cycle is working for you. It's strengthening your body and your bones and your heart and your brain. So, how prevalent is that? And then tell me a little bit about your experience as a coach working with athletes in regards to that matter.
Yeah, for sure. So, amenorrhea, or what was also known as female athlete triad,
Hmm.
it has now been switched to Red S, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. So it is very prevalent because there are also so many different levels. Okay, so we talk about, and you guys have talked about many, many times that the female cycle gives us clues about what's going on in our body, right? So the red S is so prevalent. And like I said, there were so many different levels of it, right? So there can be performance issues. That's the most basic, all the way to completely losing your period. And then at that point, what is the hardest thing to get through to these female athletes is that it is not normal. They think that, and the coaches tell them, especially the male coaches, they say, oh, that's totally normal. You're working really hard. And then you forget about it. Oh, it's normal. Okay, great. I'm working really hard. This is awesome. Like, this is proof that I'm working really hard, right? But no, that is proof that you're not getting in proper nutrition, that you're overtraining. And if you lose your period, the importance of that period, right? Like, your bones is probably one of the biggest things, and you need strong bones to perform, right? There's this story of a 16-year-old runner who lost her period, and she was running, and male coaches, she mentioned it to the male coaches, right? And they just kept saying, oh, it's normal, it's fine. And so she just kept carrying on. So one day she got in the pool to do a pool workout, to swim, and she pushed off the wall and broke her ankle. Like, it is the importance of that period, right? And the health of our ligaments, our bones, everything is vital, and it's not normal. I think that is the biggest thing that I struggle with, is that it's not normal. They think it is normal, and that they're so worried about what they look like. They don't want to gain weight, right? So they don't want to, then they'll put in the workouts, but they don't want to fuel it properly because like I said earlier, we have that societal connotation with food, right? We don't want to gain weight. We don't want to look fat when we're, so those are the two biggest things I feel like that are hard to kind of get past with female athletes is fueling properly. They'll work hard and until they're like driving themselves into the ground, right? But that fueling is really important, and like getting that past how we look, and it's fueling how you're working and not how you look.
Our body image is so tied to all this, and not that men can't have body image issues, they certainly do, but for women it's more intertwined, and that's probably by the nature of women, but also, like you said, societal kind of pressure around kind of body image. Let's talk about protein, Jillian, and how important protein is for performance, for muscle. I think people do really wonder, because there is different numbers thrown out for what's adequate amount of protein for an athlete. Kind of what is your mantra around protein? And I also would like for you to touch on creatine, because again, creatine obviously has been talked about a ton in social media right now. So just give your thoughts around protein, creatine, and really, do you think there's benefits to supplementing with creatine as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting with protein is the building block of our muscles. So yes, it is very, very important. I think what we need to kind of think about more with protein is the timing of our protein, than like, oh my gosh, I need this amount of protein today or else, right? Like I would say worry first about the timing of your protein. And when I say timing, I mean, like, as an athlete, you need to make sure you have, anywhere around 10 to 20 grams of protein before your workout, because we're preparing our body, our brain for that workout, right? Like, we have to have something on board for that workout, not only for energy, but for then the breakdown of our muscle, right? So before is very important, and immediately after is very important. And that's going back to your question before too, as far as the differences between male and female, is we need protein much sooner than males do after our workout. So like within 30 minutes of our workout, is when we need protein and that higher amount. So you're thinking probably, anywhere from 35 to 45 grams of protein after your workout within 30 minutes. And that is really hard. And that's why I make timing so important, is because a lot of times if you just got done with a really hard workout, a lot of people don't want to eat. A lot of females don't want to eat. So that's why the timing to me is a little more important, because you have to do it. That timing with protein is super important. And then just making sure you get protein within each meal. So that's why I talk about more the timing than I do the actual grams per day, right? Like, let's focus on that first and then get protein in every meal. And then you should naturally just come to that total daily amount needed.
And that's a good way
Creatine
oh, go ahead.
is,
Continue. Sorry, I was going to say that's just a good reminder too of just all cycle long,
yes.
being prepared and being mindful of being, suited up to be an athlete every day.
Yeah,
Sure.
it is. It is. It is a daily thing for sure. And then creatine is, I think it is very important, but for so many different reasons, right? It does support our energy system, which is very important for performance, but it supports so many other things. Supports our brain, supports our gut. And women are super afraid of creatine because they think they're going to get bloated or they're going to get puffy, right? So, and I remember in college, so I played Division I basketball, and they would like force it down our throats after every practice, every like we were constantly in the training room having to drink our creatine. And I got puffy. I got super puffy my freshman year. And that's the thing with creatine, is you don't have to get to the point of that, right? Eliminate what is called the loading phase. So a lot of times like the 20 grams is kind of considered that loading phase, where you get a bunch of creatine in like the first week or two, and then you start tapering off. We can eliminate that loading phase, which then and you keep it to that like 5 grams daily. And that eliminates the side effect of that bloat or puffiness. Because I would say the importance of creatine, especially on our brains, like I feel like that is even more important than our performance. Like I feel like the performance benefit of creatine is a bonus. Because there's so many studies coming out on the brain effects of creatine, and that it is even more powerful than an antidepressant. With depression being so prevalent, I just feel like that is huge and should be broadcast should be broadcast everywhere. So yeah, I think I have my female athlete daughters taking it. So yeah, it's very important.
Well, I was just chewing on my creatine gummies before we started podcasting, so I was getting mine in. Sometimes like
Nice.
I might be a little puffy because like I really like the gummies. It's a little too much. My husband, we joke about it because I just struggle so terribly with like putting the powder in the water. It is literally like just a brain glitch I have between like that scooper and my water glass. And so I got the gummies, and it has made it easier for me to get my creatine in daily. There's
That's
zero
good.
sugar in them too. But
Oh,
you brought
nice.
up your daughters, Jillian, and I know like, again, people love to hear kind of personal examples, but do you have anything to share about kind of your own personal journey with athleticism, or your daughters, and just, again, how maybe you can transform someone from being an average athlete, maybe even to a better athlete, or really what are the things that kind of make the difference? Because that's what people are looking for. They're like, I'm a good athlete, but like, what can I do to make the difference, to be a better athlete, to really up my game?
Right. Gosh, yeah, there's so many different levels to that, but I'll start with I would say my journey is really through my daughters. I have 4 daughters. And my oldest daughter played Division I soccer, professional soccer. Daughter number 2, D1 athlete as well, track. Daughter number 3 is coming up for college doing track. So their journey has kind of been my journey. And I will say, Number two, and Jamie, you talk about this a lot, which I love, is the volume knob, right? We each have our own volume knob when it comes to our hormones and how loud they are speaking to us. And that's the biggest thing is listening to what your hormones are saying for you personally, right? And so with my story, each daughter, even within my own daughters, like each daughter had their own volume knob, right? And my second daughter, her volume was really loud. And she was a really, really good athlete. And all my daughters were three sport athletes in high school. And this, my daughter number two in particular, like I said, her volume was really loud. And she had things like heavy legs. She had headaches, cramps. So very, very typical, what you would say, typical cycle, right, symptoms. But as a really good track athlete and a hurdler, those heavy legs did not do her well, right? But she also had, and as an athlete, she also had mental highs and lows, right? So she'd be really happy and energetic to to very depressed and no energy, right? So like emotional highs and lows also came with her physical highs and lows. Okay. So I really want to point that out as well, because as a athlete, you get bombarded with mental strength. You need to be mentally tough. You need to be, and that can be really hard within the female cycle, right? Because you get into that luteal phase, right? And you think, oh, I can't get through this. I can't do this. Like your mental game is just much lower, right? So just knowing that volume knob, and for her, she didn't. She really thought, and she wouldn't be articulate about it. She just kind of would suffer in silence. I noticed it because just my education, I could just see the highs and lows of it, but she wasn't articulating it. She wasn't talking about it. And she was really suffering in silence. She thought there was something wrong with her. And she thought during these times of lowness, both physically and mentally, that she couldn't perform, that she wouldn't be like, oh, great. Like this is how I'm feeling right now. And I have to go run a 300 hurdle, right? But, she would just suffer in silence. So finally, when it was articulated and that it came out, we were able to, and we went and saw Teresa, we were able to kind of get things on board that really helped level out those highs and lows. You're still going to have a little highs and lows, but those extremes are not normal, not normal at all. And that's what I think a big thing I want to tell athletes is, 1 or 2 days of the extremes is not really normal, right? You're going to have 1 or 2 days of, okay, yes, lulls and performance slow downs a little bit, but just those 1 or 2 days of extreme symptoms is not normal. So with Kinsley, when we kind of finally figured things out, we got some supplements on board. We dialed in her nutrition, and just her knowing, if we didn't change anything, just the fact that she knew that this was because of her hormones, like and what was happening through each month, that was huge for her. Just knowing it, that there wasn't something wrong with her and that there was something that we could do to help. So what we did was we kind of dialed in her nutrition. We added in some supplements. And what was crazy was on state track. So leading, districts, qualifying for state track was all in her luteal phase. And then she's waiting. She's like, my period is supposed to start any day now. And mentally, before, she would just shut down. She'd be like, great, I'm done. I can't perform, right? Because I'm starting my period. Leading up to state, she made it all to finals. state championship day, she starts her period. And because of everything we had on board, not only physically, but mentally, she was prepared, right? Like like I'm okay. And you know what? You can perform your absolute personal best still on day one of your period.
Mm-hmm.
She ended that day with personal records and state championships.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yes. And that's what I like want to scream off the rooftops is like you just knowing and putting a few things into place, thinking about your training, tracking what you're feeling is huge. Is like that in and of itself is going to make you a better athlete.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
But then even like you're saying, because I can imagine, yes, this mental war thinking, oh gosh, I'm I'm in my luteal phase or I'm in my period, and that just means I'm not going to be as strong or I'm not going to be this and that. That you were able to convey to her, yes, while the cycle is important to understand and know,
Hmm.
it's still really a matter of how do we mentally work through this? Because I know as an athlete, myself and my sister and I, we were just 18 months apart. So her and I were always that kind of at war with each other. Like we'd always be like,
Yes.
who's going to be faster? Um, and always there's like this mental, yes, I feel like that's a whole other episode, but so important. And I don't know if there's ever been a study done, but there should be in regards to the athlete and their mental resiliency and where they're at in the cycle. And what I want to see is that because we have control over our thinking, and there's neuroplasticity, we can change those trudge marks, whatever you want to
Mhm.
call them, in the mind, that we do really have the power to help ourselves work through this mentally. It's so good.
Yes. Yes.
Jillian, as we kind of start to wrap up, I have one question I want to make sure that we cover. What protein protocol? So you mentioned before workouts, so I'm kind of
Mhm.
backtracking, but before workouts, like 10 to 20 grams of protein. What form is that taking in women? And then after their workout, when they're really hammering protein, 35 to 45 grams of protein, what form of protein is that taking? Are you encouraging them to do a protein shake? Are you giving them a million beef sticks? Can you imagine? Yeah,
No,
I'd
I
like to
can.
know what that looks like.
Yeah, I would say I always love food first. So it's easy for before the workout to get in that 10 to 15 in a beef stick or whatever you'll actually eat, right? More importantly is that post meal where you may not feel like it
Mhm.
at that point, like, and to get that higher amount without, to get that high amount, you're having to like, if you did food first, it's a lot of food, right? And if you're not hungry, you're not going to be able to get that in. So
Mhm.
at that point is where I would recommend a supplementation whatever you'll take, right? The powder, but just make sure if you do powder, make sure it's a clean, high quality protein. I really like Fairlife. Fairlife has a core power, which has 45 grams of protein in a little milk drink. And it's just because it's extra filtered, it doesn't have a ton of extra crap in it. A mix of both. To your answer is a mix of both, and really how you'll get it in the best is just making sure you're going to get it in.
Yeah, those 42-gram Fairlives are
Yeah.
amazing. It's kind
Yeah.
of amazing. And for calorically, they're low calorie, so it's not like you have to down so much food to get the 42 grams of protein.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean they're a little pricier. They have a 26-gram protein too. I mean, they're not a perfect
Mhm.
food, right? The
Mhm.
ultra purist, it's not like it is a processed food, but still,
Right.
again, to get 42 grams of protein in one
Yeah.
small shake drink like that, and they actually
Mhm.
taste really good. Anyway,
It's delicious.
I'm a huge fan of those. We
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
those often. So,
Yeah.
all right, Jillian, this has been really awesome. I hope that athletes out there are going to learn so much, and I know people can work with you as well as a hormone coach. So Jamie's going to tee up the last question here. But before we do that, why don't we just have you tell us how people can work with you and where your social media handles are at?
Of course, I'm awful at social media though, but you can absolutely direct message me there. Instagram at jillianbwell.com is my website. And I'm totally drawing a blank, but obviously like that's in all forms of that is my Instagram. Instagram's my favorite. So hit me up there. But I do also have a website that has all of my information. Well, my email address is coach@jillianbwell.com. So that is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely put it in the show notes.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And
Drawing
then,
a blank there.
yeah, no worries. And then Jillian, do you still do workshops for coaches and things?
I haven't done one in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy season for me right now, but that is something that, yes, I would really love to do because, and something we really didn't cover a whole lot here, but is teaching the basics of the female, right? The female and how the cycle works. Because again, it's just, especially for male coaches, just knowing the basics is going to be huge for them and women, right? I think of single dads with daughters. I think, there's so many different support systems in a female athlete's life that needs this information. So yeah, I really hope to start getting that going again, because not only learning the female cycle, but just how to approach it, because it's such kind of a taboo, especially for male coaches. It's such a taboo that they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to feel creepy. I don't, so just talking about and working through how to have those discussions is really important.
So really good. So if you're a wife of a male coach, or you know of somebody in your school system or whatever else that works with athletes, really passionate about their job and they want to learn more, have them reach out. And again, we'll include your notes, information in the show notes so that people can easily access you, Jillian. So as we wrap up this episode, I'm going to ask you the question we always ask. What do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
I would say exactly that your hormones and the way you were created is absolutely genius. Like when you learn about it, I wish females learned about it. I wish they learned to track. I wish they knew what their bodies are doing and what they're capable of doing, right? Because there's so many times, and we didn't talk about this much, but there's so many times that it gets covered up, right? Especially as female athletes. They have one little symptom that gets covered up, right? It gets covered up and then they have no idea what they're capable of. And I always think of Captain Marvel. Do you guys like superheroes?
Oh, I love the Avengers.
Oh, sweet.
Love it.
The Captain Marvel, right?
Okay. Yep.
Captain Marvel, where she has these amazing powers, right? And whoever the powers above her have this little patch on her that is dampening her powers. And once she figures that out, she rips off the dampening device and she is now like, holy cow, look at my powers now. Like I thought I was powerful before. Now look at me, right? Like that is what I think of when we get covered up, when our hormones get covered up, is we're competing and we're trying all these things with one arm tied behind our back.
Yeah.
So if women learn their cycle, and once they learn their cycle, they too will realize the genius of their hormones, and then they defend it. Once you realize how cool they are, then you want to defend it. You don't want to be covered up. You want to learn more about it. You want to share about it. You want to, again, just knowing and learning your hormones, you'll realize the genius as well. And that's what I wish every woman knew.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love that.
That was a great
analogy.
I know.
Great way to end it, Jillian.
We're stealing that one.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll watch that movie in a whole new light.
Yeah, that's so great. And for those of you out there, the little analogy is to synthetic hormones, to birth control. Like we suppress our own genius by these synthetic hormones, and we're told that that's normal as women, and that is not. And if you follow someone like Stacey Sims, who's really into hormones and athletic performance too, and she talks about just how those synthetic hormones also stunt your muscle growth. We could have talked about that a lot more with that. And I guess we'll just have to bring Jillian back on to do so.
Totally.
Yeah, you were just scratching the surface with that.
I know, totally. Yeah, we didn't get into that. So we'll bring you back, Jillian. Thanks so much for being on the Hormone Genius. And we'll see you real soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.